We've still got a few more people arriving. We'll start at about 1 or 2 past. That's it. Good. Welcome, everyone. My name is Don McGrath. I'm here with Luke Sophia, and we are talking about navigating AI and assessments with students. Can I get you to press a button, Luke?
Sure.
I'd like to start by acknowledging the country on which we gather and join with the University of Queensland in acknowledging the traditional owners and the custodianships of the lands on which we meet. We pay our respects for their ancestors and descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country, and I think celebrate that this continues to be a place of learning, which it has been for an incredible amount of time. All right. Let's keep going. So today we are going to try and dig into 4 things. The aim is to have a very conversational approach to what's going on. We have read a fair bit, played with a lot, drawn on research that has predated generative AI in some of this work, but also this is very much an emerging area, and your experiences, wherever you are across UQ, I think are really valuable to add to this conversation as we learn together about the best ways to support our students in engaging with generative AI. So we're going to talk about how can students use generative AI in assessment, which of those uses are misconduct, how would students actually do some of that, and then how can we encourage people to engage with integrity and try and draw on those experiences so that we can give you some good advice and hopefully things you can implement in the next few weeks. Yeah. So we wanted to start with UQ's position on generative AI, and this came out in late January last year, and it hasn't changed. I think it's going to stay the same for a little while longer. And we're recognizing, I think it's still pretty true, that the ongoing advance of generative AI technologies both present opportunities and challenges for teaching and assessment. Its availability requires ongoing appraisal of our teaching, assessment, design, evaluation, and governance. And while protecting academic integrity is crucial, we also acknowledge the increasing prevalence of AI in our daily lives, making it critical for us to help students to understand the ethical and effective use. I think this is still true. I think it's still reasonable. If anyone disagrees, please let me know. I have a bit of a privileged position, hopefully being able to nudge this a little bit and change it. And I'm very open to arguments that this isn't quite right yet. And I do expect it to change over the next year or 2. Let's keep going.
All right. So one of the things we'd like to start off with is just a little bit of a Padlet brainstorming activity, and looking at discussing how students could use generative AI in their assessments. So we've got a Padlet set up there, and you can use the QR code, but I'll also share a link. So,
beat you to it, Luke.
Yep. Thank you. So I might switch my sharing over to the Padlet so that we can see how people are looking at that. So everyone comes from a different discipline, and you might have already encountered a number of different things here in the way that they're using it. And it is going to vary hugely from discipline to discipline. If you see an option that someone else, a comment that someone else has written, and you have also seen that or think that's true, give it a thumbs up or a heart.
And this framework that we put across the top was put together in part by David Rowland, who's one of our student learning advisors over in student services. And he's had, I think it's decades now of experience of supporting students work through their assessment, and just sort of went, well, this is how we support students without AI. Let's see if we can think of ways that we can pull that in for using AI.
You know, someone's written searching for synonyms, and I think that one's particularly funny because it's one of those things that I think has been plaguing students ever since the word processor was invented. Um, one of the things that I've been seeing after a decade of marking essays is that, you know, the quality of synonyms has improved because students will right click on the word and ask Microsoft Word to find themselves a better synonym, but now they'll get a better sentence that masks the fact that they're just trying to find different ways of saying the same thing. Just as a general question, more to look at the emotions surrounding this issue. Looking at this big list on Padlet, how do these options make you feel? Do they make you excited or uncomfortable, fearful for the future of academia? What do you get from some of these things?
Thank you to everyone who's contributing in chat. It's interesting to see that range of emotions. I agree with most of these, and I think I feel all of them, sometimes simultaneously, sometimes waving through the different experiences from uncomfortable to optimistic and curious and excited. I try and dwell on some of them more than the others.
It is important though. This emotional component of it will come up again. So I'm not just
Yeah. And as Julia noted, it's not
voyeur.
someone, yeah. Yeah, that comment that AI will not take your job, the person who uses it will.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I think that
I
that
like that.
complexity of, yeah, but there is those complexities about, you know, this is just how students using an assessment, but there's also edges around people's roles across UQ and parts of our jobs are to do these things. And if AI is doing them in place, you know, there's that other emotional impact to us and shift to what we do. Okay.
You know, I reckon we should use this Padlet as just another tool as well that we should share with the assessment hub ideas factory.
Yeah.
Anyway, designing effective prompts will be an important skill. Yeah, might make reading first year essays more enjoyable. I mean, Tina, I think that's optimistic. I don't think that's possible, but I like the way you think.
You love your first year essays, Luke.
I do. I do. I am being snarky. All right, cool. So let's go back to all right. Now, that was an we wanted to look at how the activities, just what they were in the first place, to figure out what they're capable of and other things. So we thought we'd do a poll at this point to figure out what usages we think are appropriate for the for your particular context. So don't worry about like the general ideas of them. Just think about whatever context you're in about whether or not these are good ideas. And I'm going to have this pull up in Zoom. So. All right, hopefully everyone should see this poll come up, but have a think about them. So this is about the uses that are inappropriate for your context. Give you guys a couple minutes to have a think about that. You can answer none. Absolutely. If you have a thought, I'd love to see it in the chat. If there's one that makes you feel particularly strongly, or a thought that you'd like to, feel free to share it. And also turn on your microphone if you'd like to express a complicated thought without typing.
Can I hold one moment before doing that? Because just as Peter said, it's very contextual. What's the learning objectives? Peter, we want people to answer from their context. So I'm hoping that answer comes out very strongly, that it is contextual.
Yeah, I think so. So, for example, the one about summarizing a reading, it depends. Like if what they're doing is a research-based course and part of their skill is actually understanding academic writing, then if they're not reading it and they're not getting that skill and they're just getting AI to summarize it, then they're not achieving the learning objective. But then in other situations, maybe it's okay. Same with doing the initial draft. If one of your objectives is about communication skills and written communication, then really the question comes back to, are they avoiding achieving the learning objective? Are they offloading that to the generative AI?
Peter, I absolutely agree.
It really highlights the complexity of this particular problem, where it might be perfectly acceptable in one task in the same course, but not in the next one. Or it might be acceptable in a completely different course, despite being the same task.
Yeah. Absolutely, Phil.
I'm not sure what you mean, Craig, by synthesizing effectively. Is that a reference to Bloom's taxonomy of with it being a high-level skill?
Don't get that technical on me. I'm meaning more, if the AI does it for them, won't it be, you'll be able to read that it doesn't look like they've done any actual analysis. How much is AI going to be able to do? Is there a way that academics can still, as subject matter experts, be able to say that's not very well thought out, therefore they won't score well, so AI is not making it a good option?
We're really going to have to clarify what's an acceptable usage on
Yeah,
a very granular level.
Remember, I'm an admin person, so what I'm seeing though is that people are, maybe English as not their first language, are doing stuff in their own language. Maybe they're understanding it well. They're using AI to make it into an acceptable English version, and then, as far as I can tell, turn it in saying this is AI generated, and then they're being called up for misconduct. Can you tell? I don't know how clear it is. It's not clear to me in that sort of misconduct sphere how we can use AI effectively, but also not be accusing people of cheating. And so I was just thinking, well, if you ask AI to summarize something, it's still, have they put in their own arguments? It's not as good as a person reading this stuff, understanding it, making an argument, and then, taking that to a logical conclusion. So can AI make it that great for them? Are people seeing that?
Yeah. Luke, do you want to have a look at the poll results? And then I think we should come back to Craig's question.
So hopefully that's popped up for you. It looks like drafting an assessment is in the majority as being inappropriate, with the feedback and editing drafts being the most appropriate. I am curious about the one for summarizing readings there. So what's the thought there? Because it seems a little bit mixed. What makes it appropriate or inappropriate, do you think? Because Alicia said that summarizing could be okay if they want to revise some articles.
I just think it comes back to what are they uploading? So what are they avoiding? If they're not understanding the concept and they're just using it to get a really simplified, easy version so they don't have to go through the process of really learning and understanding, that's where the issue is.
Would anyone happen to know off the top of their heads why there is seemingly more resistance to deep reading, or is that just a problem that's always existed?
I think it's multifaceted. So some of it's time related, whether students have given themselves the time to do it. Sometimes the reading is too dense, particularly where English is not the main language. And so it becomes very difficult and probably more time consuming. I think there could be many other reasons.
I don't know, some of the work I had to look at once about reading speeds and how long it takes to actually interpret tricky text is incredible. And those differences of what people's experiences are lead to incredible amounts of difference in time.
Yeah, especially technical text, where you're still trying to get the jargon and get the understanding. It's a long process.
And I think really, really hard for experts to have that experience of what it's like to be new to a topic and in a different language to what people are used to. So I think some of those are really interesting spaces. I'm intrigued that there were lots of nones, and it seemed like there were a couple of situations where everything was bad. So one of the things that I thought would come out of this is how to communicate what's actually okay in your assessment to students is really tricky. And we've got these big blunt statements at a university level saying, acknowledge use, only use it when people tell you to. But also it's really hard to acknowledge that, I use generative AI for some brainstorming, and maybe I didn't actually end up using that brainstorming, but it inspired me to go this different direction. And then some of that's a really hard space for students to be in. It's a hard space for academics to be in. So I think having some sympathy for students moving through this and doing what we can to help will make a change.
Hey, Dom, was there any of these that particularly got your goat up? Any that you think are inappropriate?
I absolutely agree with Peter. It depends on what you're assessing. I think there are pockets of UQ where we assess each and every one of these things. And if that's what your learning outcome is, and you're trying to find out, can students brainstorm, and they've gone and used generative AI to brainstorm, then that's inappropriate. And you're not getting a proper understanding of students' abilities to do that. There are places where we assess editing, there's places where we assess summarizing. And in those places, it's not the right thing to do. But in most other places, it could well be. So none of them on their own get my goat up.
If I can interject for one that particularly does for me, rewriting their thoughts to make them clearer and coherent. I think that there's a certain mix there about whether or not it's inappropriate, but I think that there is no time at which it's a good idea to have an AI sort of make sense of your thoughts, because the process of building critical thinking is one that's continuous and effortful and difficult. And if the AI is just sort of doing the work for you, our critical thinking skills diminish rather than are enhanced. It's a labor-saving device that makes us sloppier rather than better.
I'm going to disagree, Luke. My favorite thing I've ever done with AI is got a GPT little bot whose only job was to disagree with me. And I would put my idea in thinking, here's a good idea, this is a solid thing to do. And it would poke holes and disagree with everything I said to try and, which made me think about things more deeply, made me think about, all right, maybe I haven't thought this through. Here's some, ideas that I should pull in, asked it to include some, academics work that I should read. And it was annoying, but I think it made my critical thinking and my approach better.
See, now you're getting around my argument because you're using devil's advocate to describe a devil's advocate, and I absolutely agree with everything you just said. But no, this is really interesting. Okay, and I can see that there's been a lot of different discussions, and yeah, I think that Chris is right that Dom should share his Trollbot. All right, cool. So let's keep going on. Now, now that we've had a discussion about the ways that we can use AI, I wanted to get a sense of what you think are the reasons why students cheat or commit misconduct. So why do they do the wrong thing, do you think? See, I think we've made the mistake here of asking this question of all these people who know the facts.
This is why we ask rather than telling you.
Yes.
There's probably people across this group who know this far better than us and have first-hand experience of dealing with students in these situations. Yeah, and absolutely agree.
Yeah, all of these answers I think are relevant.
Yeah. Shortcuts are tempting, Paul. And sometimes shortcuts are good things and sometimes they're bad things. Yeah. Yeah, Julia, and that confidence, if you think AI is going to do a better job, that's kind of a sad place for our students to be.
Perhaps there's an element there of challenging students to be better than an AI.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
All right. Well, let's keep going on. But these are really good points.
Yeah. And I have talked to a couple of academics around this work, and there's been a pile of research into it. I've asked, some of our colleagues down at Cradle if they have looked into this more, and they responded that it's some of the most boring area to research, because if you ask a group of people like this, you get pretty much the same answers as if you do a whole lot of serious research in this space. And I think that's exactly what we found. The one comment that we thought was interesting when we're looking through is that group cheating is really interesting and complex, far more than I thought, and found a couple of papers where people were researching what happens around cheating, and they studied Boy Scouts and groups like that to try and find out more about those group dynamics and how things shift.
The one that really struck me most, and the one that I saw that came up a lot throughout the research, is that they simply don't know what cheating means. A lot of students, I think, don't understand that something is not a good idea, or that it doesn't constitute misconduct. And AI is a particular space at the moment where I think that they're fearful, but those who are using AI are like, well, this doesn't count as plagiarism, therefore it's not academic misconduct. Or perhaps it's not plagiarism is the only way to commit academic misconduct, or perhaps that plagiarism means copying a whole bunch of text rather than, stealing someone's ideas and not understanding that. And yeah, Tina, I think that was a really interesting one too. Student perception that academic staff lack credibility. There was a certain element there that if students found that the academics didn't care, then they wouldn't either. They felt like the subjects were nonsense, and therefore they didn't have to worry about plagiarism or academic misconduct.
Yeah, I think of this one a bit like it's okay to steal a pen from a bank, but it's not okay to steal a pen from a human. And that if you dehumanize that experience of education, then it's okay to cheat, is the way I have theorized this one, but I could be very wrong.
Yeah, it was like during COVID. It's perfectly acceptable to steal all the rotisserie chickens from Coles, but not okay to steal toilet paper.
I don't remember it being okay to steal chickens, Luke.
Oh, okay. I probably gotta go and
We'll edit the
offer some
recording.
people apologies then. Okay, cool.
So I think Jackie hinted at this before. One of the things that the revised assessment procedures that have just recently been released and that are on the ASD site and will soon be on the PPL is that we now have a responsibility where situations where cheating is likely to occur, we have to identify them and do something to address them. There's some new guidelines to try and help and to think about these, but they all boil down to thinking about the situations that have been described in chat around why might students cheat, and then thinking about what can we do to try and reduce some of that pressure. And what can we do to try and support students so they feel confident to ask, so that they feel they do better than AI, so that they're not doing things at the last moment in those really high stress situations, and so they really know what they should be doing. So let's go, Luke. I'm excited by this next activity.
All right. So we're going to see if we can do this ourselves. All right. All right, hopefully you can all see Bard. All right, so I guess what we need to do is how can MX model?
So we thought this was tricky. We thought it'd be a difficult task. And with tricky and difficult tasks, what else should you do other than ask an AI? And we've chosen Bard for something different. It's Google's AI. If you haven't tried it before, it's a fun one to play with. For anything more sensitive, again, we'd recommend Bing, which is supported by UQ. But it's good to see what students might be doing with different systems and to explore what the different AIs do. So what have we got as an answer, Luke?
Well, firstly, be honest and transparent, citing sources, discussing limitations of your own research, avoiding plagiarism, being truthful in interactions. So honesty and transparency. Well, sure. Fostering integrity and fairness, design assessments that value honest effort and learning, provide clear expectations and grading rubrics, treat all students with respect and fairness, address academic misconduct promptly and appropriately. What do you think, guys? What do we think of those? Are these good? They hit all the right notes for fostering integrity and fairness? Good points, bad points? Is any of it nonsense? Is there anything missing? Yeah, Jessica, I think that's a really good point. I have a hard time imagining people from this cohort not doing these things already. Which, I mean, it doesn't feel like it's helping us very much to tell us, keep doing what you're doing when the problem still persists. Yeah, good points, but not necessarily constructive. Doesn't say how.
All right.
Integrate ethics into teaching. Yeah. Okay.
Let's ask how. Can you say, please provide 3 activities for a first year chemistry course to do some of these things, whatever it is, however you'd like to prompt.
Skills and cultures. So we've got a case study discussion, identifying the ethical issues involved. It's got some learning outcomes. I think case studies are actually always a really good idea because they're like hyper specific and require engagement with the theory and the practice then. Collaborative research integrity activity. Dividing students into groups and getting them to assign them a research integrity aspect, responsible authorship, data manipulation. Each group creates a short presentation or infographic. Science and society debate. Organize a classroom debate around a controversial topic. Explore the ethical information. Hone the research and critical thinking skills. Practice respectful and nuanced communication.
All right. Does anyone want to critique these? There's a bit of me that would like to spend the next hour critiquing these, but I think the motherhood statements were pretty good. The details of how to do this, there's hints that some of these are okayish. Some of them I think could be done really well, but I think there's a lot that's, I don't know how some of these would create that connection between me and students, how it would make it feel like a respectful and engaging community of learning. Some of those things that are the higher goals throughout it.
Yeah, and like I'm not convinced that having a debate in any context is a good idea. I mean, I've been teaching philosophy for 10 years and I've never ever used a debate because it's always it always results in the angriest man shouting. It's just a bad idea. I think Jackie makes a really good point there too. There's still no elements here of why students should care about it. It's just sort of, I don't know, ethical navel gazing to a degree. And how would they scale to 1,000 student cohort? What do you think, guys? Like, I think that's an interesting question. What would you do to do this with 1,000 students?
Well, and I think there's some activities that, these specific activities I wouldn't do, but there's some activities that we've said around, clarifying what people need to do in their assessment, what's okay, what's not okay. There's things we talked around, having students feel that they're working with humans rather than with the system, around students' time management and things like that, that I think you can do with 1,000 students, but some of these, I wouldn't.
I love this one. Split them into breakout rooms of small groups of 30 students.
Yep.
Collaborative online tools. So there's a lot of online platforms here that are involved and leveraging other technology.
Yeah. Actually, absolutely agree, Peter, that we are in a very rough storm for this sort of place, that the amount of things that we're trying to do with the resources we have doesn't really add up well.
So connect it to real world issues, might help them care about it, personalizing the experience, gamifying. I have a friend from within the who did a colleague who did philosophy of gaming, and his expertise said that gamifying these things ruins both games and learning. So I don't think that's true of everything, but I'm
there
not sure.
are definitely some people who've managed to make it work in their context, but I don't think it's an easy one.
All right. I think that this has been a really interesting activity, and I'm going to stop sharing on that one there and go back to.
Before we do,
yeah.
One of the things I think is really interesting about sharing, generative AI stuff and talking through it with cohorts of people and students is what you can model and what you can explore with it. Has anyone done something like this with their students where they pulled up a generative AI tool, tried it out, looked at what it does well, looked at what it does terribly, and tried to get students to start thinking around, or colleagues or anyone else, about what the tool's actually doing and what its strengths are and where is it ridiculous and how can it actually be useful and what's effective with it? Maybe not, maybe so. Yeah, some people do. There are cases around UQ where people are doing this. I know, I'm just intrigued at how to construct activities with this sort of modeling that actually helps students understand what's good and what's not. Actually, I'm sure you do. Is there
I find
any
it-
hints that you'd
Right.
offer the world or offer us?
Yes, if you do it, or if you've seen it done, what recommendations would you say? Ah.
Intriguing.
No, that's an interesting point. I have a reader bot that I've set up for students in the upcoming semester, and I should make sure that its instructions include simplifying the language.
I had fun asking one of my GPTs to respond as Cher from Clueless and always translate things through that way. Oh, wow. Yep. Archie, I know there's things going that way. Archie, how do you make sure that you're not tricking the students as well as the AI? Yep.
So
All right.
the reason why we've done all of this on screen at the moment to share it was to specifically model how we can foster this effective culture around the use of AI, because it wasn't just demonstrating and modeling the use of the technology that was important, but it was our interaction with you as we went through. Because I mean, there's something daunting about using this live, because I don't actually know specifically what it's going to produce once it's done. And because it's Google Bard, it's going to display the whole chunk of text just blot on the screen. But it's your responses and our interactions between this that has fostered a better, more collegial culture between us. And this is a component of what we're looking to foster with students. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint.
So, Chris, they're using a rubric to evaluate the output of ChatGPT or something, or Bard, or one of those.
So that would be applying their own judgment to the response.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, that's always a good activity, the modifying a poor AI essay. But one of the things that that has come up in the research just generally and increasingly over time is that we can continue to foster a better culture and a better use of AI through our relationships to students in the first place. Even in a very large cohort, this is possible. I mean, one of the things about social media is that it's made parasocial relationships far more common. The one-sided relationships that we have with celebrities, people following Taylor Swift and feeling that they've got a personal connection to her, despite it being entirely one-sided. This is still true of lecturers. We're not as famous yet, but it's still very much a case. And whenever a student gets even any kind of personalized attention in a question or a response to an email, it feels like it's a really meaningful interaction. Peter, do you have two-sided relationships with celebrities?
Me?
Sorry, I
No.
meant Peter Rutherford.
Oh,
Because it's like it's not just a parasocial relationship; it's a regular social one.
Yeah. Well, I thought Taylor Swift's a really interesting and intriguing case where there's been a lot done and has an incredible team that manage engagement with people on social media to make it feel not one-sided. And yeah, incredible marketing business work. Okay.
So I'm curious then about what techniques that you would recommend or that you use for fostering effective practices and ethical culture in learning for your courses or for the courses that you administrate. So what happens with developing study skills or fostering this idea of prioritizing timing and time management? One of the things that has everyone mentioned earlier was leaving things to the last minute. So seeing short-term and medium-term and long-term consequences is an issue. So what are your tips and tricks?
Yep. Time management handouts, they're cool. Has anyone asked students to jump into ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to plan out a study plan for an assignment and how to get this done, or how many hours it needs to take and when? I saw a bad social media one of a student who planned their day with that and followed it to a T with what they should eat and when they should study, with mixed results. The other thing that I'd love to plug at this point is the Student Services Student Advisors do incredible work with helping students with study skills and time management. The library's got some great guides as well to help people step through planning their study and engaging with these things. Yeah, Judith, I know that work down in your school is really incredible and impactful.
Judith, could you tell us a little bit more about the emotional intelligence component? What specifically do you get into there?
It's very new. Hi. Very new. I just asked a question around some features of emotional intelligence last year of second-year students. They come into a learning experience that they haven't encountered before and have to we really push them to make decisions for themselves. And there's a lot of resistance to that. So the question centered around how they felt about making those decisions and how confident they felt about themselves. I haven't actually analysed that, but a lot of students found it really quite overwhelming. And then once they were sort of through the semester, then they were able to sort of look at it more in terms of what they gained from it. So sort of separate themselves a little bit. Yeah, but I know another colleague of mine is very interested in motivation and the emotional aspects of engagement. Yeah.
Thank you.
I wouldn't have thought about, I would have thought about discomfort, but I hadn't even considered the idea of decision paralysis to a degree. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, particularly when you add on all the extra decision options for generative AI and different misconduct and what is and what isn't. Yeah.
I wonder if that's
space.
largely the reason why Netflix has a shuffle pick something for me button now, and it didn't.
Yeah. Are you going to start building one for our students of shuffle and pick what the next activity to productively keep studying is?
All right. So
can I? Oh yeah, no, you keep going. I was going to pick up on Phil's comment, which has this hint of following up face-to-face in workshops and small groups. So Phil's giving advice weekly about where people should be up to, and then that follow-up in class, I think, is magic. But I think it goes to this slide.
So one of the things that we're interested in discussing as well is when your students are actually going to do these things, because building this culture is probably going to be an ongoing thing, but there are these individual tasks that are there. So I just want to have a quick go through a couple of these different things. So when should we be having these discussions on ethical AI usage, do you think? So this is specifically the ethics of AI, appropriateness and whatnot. You know what? I should have put numbers down the side and so everyone could just pick a number.
Yeah.
When the assessment task gets introduced?
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Early on?
Yeah,
Throughout? All the time? All right, what about advising on how to effectively use it? It's not necessarily the same thing as the ethics of it.
yeah, absolutely agree, Philip. That too early and they forget, too late, it's too late. Finding that sweet spot takes a bit of work, a bit of thought about where your students are at. Chris, for you, there is always an all of the above.
See, I never ever want to put all of the above on any question ever because I feel like that's automatically going to be the right answer.
Or it's a trap.
Yeah, or it's a trap.
Okay.
What about advising on usage should come with the description of the activities or assessment?
Yep. Tim, I absolutely agree. There should be clarity with the task, with the description, but I think there's difference between going, this is the expectations and having a clear description of that and advising and having conversations and digging in deeper. So absolutely, when people get a task, they should know what the rules and conditions are.
I really like Tina's response of advising the ethical usage, but not being sure that you can give good advice, because I feel like that's actually a perfect thing to say as well for building this positive culture. That fallibility is built in. It's like, hey, this is a shifting landscape. We're all standing on quicksand, and let's just roll with that as best we can. You think that we should be doing study skills all the time, or is that best placed somewhere in the semester? Philip, I think that's a really cool idea. Logging how they used AI and rating how useful it was. It's a good 2 steps. I'm going to remember that this semester.
Yeah. And Lisa's, were they honest? Which jumps me to, did they get AI to do it? All right. I think you need to keep pressing buttons, Luke.
Yep. The last one, just briefly, what about workload planning? When do you think we should do that? When do you do that?
Beginning. For me, it's far too often when I freak out about a deadline. Yeah. And I don't know many students who are doing that at the beginning. Well, I do know some students who are doing that at the beginning of the semester, and then there's a bit in the middle where they get really busy and stop doing that, and then freak
Tim
out later on.
In orientation week, in the lead up to exams and final lecture, by the looks of it. That seems like a really, really neat idea. So to think about it once, then upcoming exams, and then before the final exams. Okay, cool. I don't think there's any correct answers here, but I'm really interested in the way that you guys go about this, because
I don't think there's universal correct answers. There are definite correct answers for your contexts that are awesome, and there's probably many of them. But I think if there are extra things you can add in to your course to do some of these things, to address some of those concerns that we've raised up earlier, then that's going to be great. It's going to make a difference.
All right. I think that covers what we were going to discuss today, Don.
Yeah, so where we came from, we started thinking around how students can use generative AI. And we got the answer we hoped for, which is it's complex. And some students are going to do incredibly interesting things with generative AI that in some courses, some of those things are completely appropriate. In another course, exactly the same thing is going to be inappropriate. And students are probably going to struggle with that. There's also some students who are not going to touch generative AI because they're really scared of this space and they think that any engagement with this is going to lead them down the path of misconduct, which again, I think is a problem. So that clarity around what's appropriate in your course is, I think, really critical in that space. We talked a bit about why do students cheat and engage in misconduct, and the reasons that were given through chat, are really backed up by research. And if you start thinking around them, around helping students with their time management and their pressure and the connection to you and the sort of environment you're creating, I think that's a really valuable space, and a space where we can make a difference in the next couple of weeks. I know at this point in the semester, you can't go changing your assessment, and I wouldn't recommend jumping in and making major shifts at this point. But thinking about other extra things you can put through semester, the great advice you've heard from different people today, if there's different things you can weave in, take a couple of minutes here, provide an extra bit of guidance in announcements, where people should be up to, give people time in class to get started, not have a blank page they're looking at, and to check in how they're going. I think those things can make a dramatic difference to how students engage with integrity. There's also some support available. So in Italy, we're happy to talk to you about your assessment design. We're happy to provide support with using technology. If you want to talk to someone around using generative AI, we're here, and we have a bit of expertise. But the main thing we'd be engaging with is sharing what other people have done and working with you to explore what's going to work for you and your students. Importantly, there's a range of support available for your students. The library runs some great workshops, has some great resources and things that are available that you can point your students to. And Student Services has incredible support for all of those study areas about improving the way they work and learn as they go. And that can make a huge difference to how students engage with integrity. The resources from this will be available soon, early next week. I'm going to launch a quick poll as we finish. Oh, someone else has done it. Fantastic. If you could give us some feedback, we'd really appreciate it. The recording and all the resources will be available next week. And if you have questions, Luke and I'd love to hear them. So I want to finish by saying thank you so much for your engagement and sharing and all the ideas today.
Yeah, and feel free to send us an email. I always like to hear the positive feedback on my email. And if you've got any negative feedback, Dom's email's there too.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.